They planned my funeral while I was still breathing. They picked the hymns, the flowers, even the dress I'd be buried in, all while I lay in that hospital bed, motionless, a ghost in my own skin. And as their laughter echoed through the sterile white walls, I realized something chilling. Death wasn't the worst thing that could happen to me. Betrayal was. That was the moment I knew I had to take back control. My name is Ruth Delaney, and if you've ever been pushed aside before your time, forgotten by the very people you gave your life to, you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. Before I begin, I want to know, where are you watching from tonight? Tell me in the comments, because this story, my story, could have happened anywhere. I woke to the sound of my daughter's voice. At first, it was faint, like someone whispering through water. My eyelids were too heavy to lift, my tongue dry as dust. Machines hummed beside me, steady, impersonal, alive only in sound. Well, she won't make it through the week, Nora was saying. My daughter, my only girl. The doctor said her organs are failing. We should start planning, Michael. It's the responsible thing to do. Michael, my son, my firstborn. The one who used to hold my hand during thunderstorms. He sighed, that same tired sigh he used when he wanted to sound noble. Fine, but let's not drag it out like Dad's funeral. That was a circus. I wanted to scream, to ask what they were saying, but my body refused. I was trapped behind glass, alive inside a shell that wouldn't move. Then came another voice, softer, colder. Sophie, my daughter-in-law. I'll take care of the flower arrangements, she said sweetly, and I think we should hold the service at St. Augustine's. It's elegant and fitting. There was a pause, then the sound of papers. I already talked to the lawyer, Michael said. Once Mom passes, the estate transitions immediately. The business goes under my name. Nora, you'll get the lake house. Sophie and I will take the city property. That's fair. Fair. That word punched through me harder than any monitor alarm could. Fair. After everything I'd built for them. The bakery that became a chain, the late nights balancing books by candlelight, the mortgages paid, the schooling funded, the inheritance meant to make their lives easier. I lay there listening to them divide my life like scraps off a table. The nurse walked in, her shoes squeaking against the tile. Visiting hours are almost over, she said kindly. Oh, we won't be long, Nora replied. There's really nothing left to say. Nothing left to say. She said it so casually, like my entire existence was a paragraph she'd already skimmed. When they finally left, the room fell silent. The fluorescent light flickered above me, buzzing like a dying fly. My eyes stayed closed, but tears slid down the sides of my face into my pillow. I thought of my husband, James, gone 8 years now. I could almost hear him laugh, that deep rumbling sound that used to fill our kitchen. He'd warned me once, Ruth, money changes people, especially the ones who never earned it. He was right. Hours passed. Night deepened. I drifted in and out, haunted by the echo of their voices. At one point, I heard Michael's voice again, softer this time, closer. I realized he'd come back. Hey, Mom, he murmured, if you can hear me, I just want you to know we'll take care of everything. Don't worry about the business, okay? You've done enough. Done enough. His hand touched mine briefly, but there was no warmth in it, only calculation, the kind of touch that says goodbye to an asset, not a mother. The machines kept beeping. My chest rose and fell, slow and mechanical, but inside me, something new was stirring. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something colder, sharper, determination. If they wanted me gone, they'd have to wait their turn, because I wasn't finished, not with them, not with life. And as the moonlight spilled through the blinds, catching the silver edge of my wedding ring, I made myself a promise. They could plan my funeral all they wanted, but I'd be the one writing the ending. The next morning, the room smelled like antiseptic and wilted lilies. Someone had left a bouquet on the table. bright, expensive, soulless. A nurse adjusted my IV, humming under her breath, unaware that I was awake inside my prison of silence. Every sound became sharper now. The squeak of her shoes, the rattle of a food tray in the hallway, the mechanical breathing of the ventilator beside me. It was as if my body had become a cage for my mind, and all I could do was watch. Then came the voices again. "I think it's time we meet with the attorney," Michael was saying. "We can't leave the business in limbo. Clients are asking questions." "I already called him," Nora replied, her tone clipped. "He said since Mom signed over power of attorney before her stroke, you can act on her behalf. The accounts are basically yours." Sophie's voice followed, syrupy sweet. "That's such a relief. She'd hate to see the bakery fall apart. You're doing the right thing." The right thing. I wanted to laugh, but even my breath belonged to the machines. They were erasing me in real time, dismantling everything I'd worked for while my heart still beat beneath these sheets. The nurse left, the door closed, and for the first time, I forced my eyelids open, just a sliver, enough to see the pale sunlight cutting through the blinds, dust motes drifting like ghosts. My hand twitched, my fingers moved. It was small, but it was something. A surge of fear hit me. What if they saw? What if they realized I was still here? I shut my eyes again, slow, deliberate. I wasn't ready yet, not to face them, not until I knew everything. Days bled into nights, nurses changed shifts, machines beeped their lullabies. But my mind sharpened. I learned to map their voices by footsteps, Nora's impatient heels, Michael's heavy stride, Sophie's perfume arriving before she did. Each visit peeled away another layer of their greed. "I talked to the realtor," Nora said one afternoon. "She can list the lake house immediately after the service. The market's good." Michael grunted. "And the main house? Needs clearing out. I'll handle it. Sophie can sort through the jewelry." "Perfect," Sophie said softly. "You've always been so practical, Nora." Practical. That word cut like glass. When they finally left, I stared at the window. Outside, a bird perched on the sill. Small, dark, alive. It tilted its head at me before flying away. I envied it. That night, the nurse on duty was young, maybe 25. Her badge said Amira. She talked softly as she adjusted my monitor. "You're stronger than they think, Mrs. Delaney," she whispered. "I've seen your vitals. You're not done yet." I didn't move. Couldn't. But a tear slipped out, and she saw it. Her hand brushed my cheek. "There you are," she said gently. "Let's keep this between us, okay?" It was the first mercy I'd felt in weeks. From that night on, Amira became my silent ally. She dimmed the lights, changed my chart notes so the doctors believed my progress was minimal, and whispered to me about the world outside, the rainstorms, the traffic, the smell of coffee from the cafeteria downstairs. And slowly, my body began to return to me. By the end of the second week, I could move my hand. By the third, my lips. My voice came back in cracks and whispers, fragile as a match flame. One night, I whispered her name, Amira. She froze, then smiled. "Welcome back, Mrs. Delaney." It was then I understood. Silence could be a weapon. The longer they thought I was gone, the more I could prepare. I was the ghost in the hospital bed, haunting their greed, and every breath I took was a promise that their reckoning was coming. The first time I stood on my own, the world tilted. The linoleum floor stretched like an ocean under my feet, and every muscle in my body trembled, as if remembering how to live. The heart monitor beeped faster, not out of fear, but determination. I wasn't supposed to be here, not like this, but I was. Amira steadied me with both hands. "Slow breaths, Mrs. Delaney. In through the nose, out through the mouth." I obeyed, feeling the air burn my lungs. It was the sweetest pain I'd ever felt. That morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting my bed in gold. The nurse had opened the window slightly. I could smell rain on the wind, and for the first time in months, the air didn't taste like bleach. "They think I'm dying," I whispered. Amira smiled faintly. "Then let's not tell them otherwise just yet." She was right. The moment they knew I was coming back, they'd find new ways to control me. So I played along, a dying woman in recovery, frail and harmless. Behind closed eyes, I listened to their plans unravel. Nora came by less now, always in expensive clothes, her perfume sharp and confident. She complained to the nurses that I was holding on out of spite. Michael arrived rarely, only when Sophie pushed him, and every visit felt rehearsed. They spoke to me in soft tones, as if performing grief for an audience that wasn't there. I wanted to pity them, but every time I remembered their laughter over my funeral, that pity turned to iron. 3 weeks after I first moved my fingers, I asked Amira for a phone. My voice was a whisper then, but she understood. She smuggled one in beneath a towel. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Mr. Whitmore, my husband's old attorney. "Ruth?" His voice cracked with surprise. "My God, we thought—" "Not yet," I interrupted softly, "but I need your help before they make that true." We met in secret 3 days later. It was night. The hospital quiet except for the soft squeal of a cleaning cart down the hall. Amira arranged it. She knew the camera's blind spots. Whitmore arrived in a gray coat, older, balder, but the same kind eyes. When he saw me sitting upright, oxygen tube trailing from my nose, his eyes widened. "I can't believe it," he whispered. "Believe it," I rasped. "And write this down, everything I'm about to say." For an hour, I dictated a new will. Every asset, every account, every piece of property reassigned. No more fair divisions. The bakery profits would go to the employees who kept it alive after my stroke. The lake house to the local women's shelter. My personal savings to Amira's nursing scholarship fund. When I finished, Whitmore's hand trembled slightly as he lowered his pen. "You're sure about this?" I looked toward the dark window where my reflection stared back at me, pale, bruised, but unbroken. "I'm sure. They planned my ending. I'm just changing the author." He smiled sadly. "James would be proud." At the mention of my husband, my throat tightened. For years, I'd lived by his sense of fairness, his belief that family meant loyalty. But grief changes vision. You start seeing who people really are when the money starts talking. By the next morning, I'd signed the first draft. Whitmore left through the side entrance, and Amira destroyed every trace of the meeting. The visitor log, the security notes, even the flowers he'd brought. That evening, Nora called. "They said you're improving," she said flatly. "Seems so," I murmured, feigning weakness. Her sigh was audible. "Well, try to rest. The lawyer told us he's preparing the final documents. We'll handle everything." "Yes," I said softly. "I'm sure you will." When the call ended, I smiled for the first time in months. They thought I was their dying mother, fragile, compliant, grateful. But I was already rewriting my resurrection. If they were ready to write my obituary, I was ready to edit every word. By the time autumn settled in, the trees outside my window had turned the color of rusted gold. I was finally discharged from the hospital, or so everyone thought. "Your daughter mentioned arranging hospice care," the doctor said gently. "You'll be more comfortable there." I smiled weakly, nodding. Yes, hospice. But I had no intention of dying quietly. Instead, Amira drove me home herself, to my old countryside house on Maple Hill, the one my husband built when we were newly married. The smell of cedar and old paper greeted me at the door. It felt like coming home to the truth. She settled me into the upstairs room, the one overlooking the garden. My legs were still unsteady, but my mind was iron. On the bedside table, I placed a folder labeled The New Will. Inside it, the document that would undo every ounce of greed that had poisoned my family. For weeks, I lived like a ghost. Curtains drawn, lights low, pretending the end was near. Nora called twice, Michael once. Sophie didn't bother. Their messages were all the same. "Hope you're comfortable, Mom." "Just checking in. Did the lawyer visit yet?" "We'll take care of everything. Don't worry." Worry? That word had lost meaning to me. Whitmore visited in secret every Thursday. We revised and notarized every clause. We left nothing vague, nothing open to challenge. The bakery chain, once the pride of the family, would pass not to my son, but to the employees who stayed when he abandoned it after my stroke. The lake house would go to a charity for widowed women in my husband's honor. The main house, my home, would belong to Amira, who had shown more kindness in 2 months than my children had in 20 years. I was careful, meticulous. Every signature carried a lifetime of lessons. Then on a gray afternoon, as rain tapped softly on the window, I watched a video Nora had posted online, a celebration of life for me. Candles, flowers, champagne, laughter. They stood around the table like mourners in rehearsal. Michael gave a speech about Mom's legacy, while Sophie smiled like a widow in a movie. Nora held a glass of wine, pretending her tears were real. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched. It was almost theatrical, the way greed made them glow. They were performing my death for applause, for validation, for control. When the video ended, I shut the laptop and looked at my reflection in the dark screen. The woman staring back wasn't weak anymore. She was calm, cold, awake. One night, I woke, up to the sound of thunder, and whispered to Amira, "Do you know what fire does to rot?" She looked puzzled. "It burns it away?" I nodded. "Exactly." That week, Whitmore came for the final signing. The rain had stopped, and the house smelled faintly of smoke from the fireplace. As I signed the last page, he said, "Ruth, they'll come for you when they realize." "I know," I said, "and I'll be waiting." He slid the envelope into his briefcase and stood. "It's done then." "No," I said softly, "it's only beginning." After he left, I sat by the window and wrote a letter, the one they'd find inside the safe. It read, "To my children, if you are reading this, it means you expected my silence. You confused kindness for weakness and inheritance for love. But wealth built on betrayal is a curse, not a gift. Consider this your inheritance, the truth. Ruth Delaney." I sealed it, placed it beside my wedding photo, and turned off the light. Outside, the sky rumbled. Inside, for the first time since my coma, I slept without fear. They thought I was gone. They just forgot who I was. 3 months after my so-called funeral, I decided it was time to hold another kind of service, one for the living and the greedy. I still remember the smell that morning. Rain on pavement, damp leaves pressed against the porch. The world looked clean outside, but inside, my house was about to become a battlefield dressed in Sunday clothes. They thought this was the reading of my will. They thought I was dead. And for once, I decided to let them be right, at least until I walked through that door. The living room looked the same as always. Elegant, cozy, deceiving. My late husband's portrait hung above the fireplace, watching silently. A plate of untouched cookies sat on the coffee table, the way Sophie always arranged them when she wanted to look like a perfect hostess. Nora and Michael sat across from each other, tension thick enough to slice. "Do you think she left anything else to the staff?" Nora asked, crossing her arms, voice sharp as a paper cut. Michael leaned back, feigning calm. "Doubt it. She knew who did the real work. I managed her accounts for years." "You managed her accounts for yourself," she snapped. "You took money out of the business before she what? Died?" Michael's smirk was small and cruel. Sophie, perched between them like a sleek vulture, stirred her coffee. "Let's not fight before the lawyer gets here. We'll all get our share. Ruth was fair. Fair, that word again, always spoken by the ones who never were. The doorbell rang. 3 heads turned. Mr. Whitmore stepped inside, shaking rain off his coat. His gray beard glistened with droplets. His briefcase looked heavier than usual. "Good morning," he said evenly. "Thank you for coming on such significant business." They straightened immediately, as though summoned to royalty. Michael stood. "Let's make this quick. My wife has an appointment." Whitmore gave a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, I imagine she does." He set his briefcase down, unlatched it slowly, the metallic click echoing through the quiet room. He looked up. "Before we begin, I must confirm that all beneficiaries are present." "Yes," Nora said impatiently. "We're all here." Whitmore's eyes flickered toward the doorway. Not quite. The air shifted, one of those moments where silence feels like warning, and then I stepped out. The room froze. Sophie's hand jerked, her coffee cup crashing to the floor. Nora gasped, a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream. Michael's face drained of color. "Hello, children," I said softly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Even the rain seemed to hush outside. You're, Michael stammered. "You're supposed to be dead?" I finished for him. "Yes, I heard. Very convenient for you, wasn't it?" Nora covered her mouth. "Mom, how? The doctors said—" "They said what you wanted to hear," I replied, "and you were too eager to believe it." I walked slowly to my chair by the fireplace, the same spot where I'd read bedtime stories, paid bills, lived a life worth protecting. Sitting felt like reclaiming the throne I never meant to lose. Whitmore cleared his throat, fighting a smile. "Shall we proceed, Mrs. Delaney?" "Please," I said. "Let's give them what they came for." He adjusted his glasses, opening the folder. Not the one they'd forged in their fantasies, but the one written by my hand. "The last will and testament of Ruth Delaney," he began. "To my beloved son, Michael, who always reminded me that time is money. I leave you both, my time and my money. My time because you'll have plenty of it now. My money because you'll see it go to those who earned it." Michael blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Whitmore continued, unbothered. "The Delaney Bakery and all its branches will be transferred to the employees who sustained it during my illness, effective immediately." "What?" Michael's voice cracked. "You can't do that. That business is—" "Yours?" I interrupted. "No, dear. You left it the moment you saw a dying woman as a door prize." Whitmore turned the page. "To my daughter, Nora, who spent years collecting sympathy while calling it devotion. I leave the lake house, but not for her comfort. It will become the Delaney Foundation, a shelter for widowed women." Nora's jaw dropped. "You're giving it away. That's our home." "It was mine," I said quietly, "and it will serve women who know what real loss feels. Like—" Sophie was trembling now. "And me? What about me?" Whitmore glanced at her page. "To my daughter-in-law, Sophie, I leave my jewelry. It will be auctioned, and all proceeds will fund nursing scholarships in the name of Amira Khan, the woman who saved my life." Sophie's face twisted. "You're insane." I smiled faintly. "No, just awake." Michael stood abruptly. "This is fraud. You were barely alive when you signed this. I'll have it overturned." Whitmore closed the folder. "Good luck. Every signature was witnessed, every document notarized. You'd be contesting the living, not the dead." "You've ruined us," Nora shouted. "No," I said softly. "You ruined yourselves the moment you buried me before I was gone." They stared at me. Not as a mother, not even as a woman, but as something they couldn't name. Something stronger than the weakness they'd built their greed upon. Whitmore packed his papers, giving me a small nod. "It's done," he said quietly. "Yes," I whispered. "It is." They left in fragments. Michael slamming the door, Sophie muttering threats, Nora crying without tears. I sat alone by the fireplace, watching the flames flicker against the rain-streaked window. My husband's portrait stared down at me, his smile almost knowing. "For the first time in years," I murmured to him, "I'm not afraid of goodbyes." The clock ticked, the house settled, and peace, real peace, filled the empty space they'd left behind. Because endings, I'd learned, don't always come with funerals. Sometimes they come with freedom. The morning after the will reading, my home felt impossibly quiet. The air was clean, cool, unburdened, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. I sat by the window with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the drizzle fade into sunlight. For years, this house had been filled with the hum of family, laughter, arguments, television noise, birthday candles, and Christmas carols. But that noise had turned to venom long before my coma. What I'd mistaken for love had been convenience. What I thought was devotion had been greed. And now, in the stillness, I didn't hear absence. I heard peace. Later that week, Whitmore came by one last time. He was gentler than usual, his voice carrying the ease of closure. "It's done, Ruth," he said. "Everything's processed. The business is transferred, the foundation established, the funds distributed." I nodded. "Then it's finished." He hesitated. "Your children may never forgive you." I smiled faintly. "That's all right. They're not the ones I did this for." He studied me for a long moment before standing. "You know," he said softly, "James would have been proud." My chest tightened. He'd have told me to stand up for myself sooner. "Maybe," he said, "but he'd still be proud." After he left, I sat there for a long while, listening to the rain return. I thought of James, the way he'd always smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, the way his laughter could fill a room even when it was empty. I imagined him sitting beside me, nodding in approval, and for the first time since he passed, I felt him there, not as memory, but as quiet strength. The following month, I visited the Delaney Foundation for the first time. It was held in what used to be my lake house, the same one my daughter once called her weekend retreat. Now the house buzzed with life. The front porch was lined with potted flowers. The laughter of women echoed from the kitchen. I saw a few of them, some young, some old, some with eyes that carried whole stories. Widows, mothers, daughters who had nowhere to go. They greeted me warmly. None of them knew who I was, not really. To them, I was just Miss Ruth, the quiet woman who liked to bring cookies and sit in the sunroom while they talked. That was enough. I didn't want them to see me as a benefactor. I wanted them to see me as one of them. A woman who had lost, learned, and lived to tell it. One of the younger women, Claire, offered me a seat by the window. "You remind me of my grandmother," she said shyly. "She always said life doesn't end when people leave. It ends when you stop forgiving yourself." I smiled. "Your grandmother was a wise woman." She grinned. "So are you." A few weeks later, a letter arrived from Amira, the nurse who had once whispered, "You're stronger than they think." It was written in neat cursive on simple paper. "Mrs. Delaney, I got my scholarship letter today. I'll be starting at Columbia this fall. I don't know how to thank you, but I'll try to live the kind of life you believed I could." With gratitude, Amira. I must have read it 10 times. That letter meant more to me than any apology my children could ever write. I folded it carefully and placed it inside my husband's old Bible, the one with the pressed 4-leaf clover inside. It felt like the right kind of promise. By autumn, the bakery, Delaney's Bread and Heart, reopened under the new employee board. They sent me photos of the grand reopening, smiling faces, aprons dusted with flour, my husband's portrait on the wall with a plaque that read, "For James and Ruth Delaney, who believed in honest work." They'd started something beautiful, something lasting, and for once the legacy I'd left behind wasn't made of property or profit. It was made of people. It was around this time that Nora and Michael showed up. I heard the car before I saw it, tires crunching over gravel, an expensive engine idling too long. When I opened the door, there they were. Michael's once perfect suit was wrinkled. Nora's eyes were swollen from tears. "Mom," Nora said softly, "please, can we come in?" I nodded and led them to the living room. The fire was burning low. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon tea. They sat on the edge of the couch, looking smaller than I remembered. Michael spoke first. "We were wrong. About everything. We thought we were protecting what you built, but we were just protecting ourselves." I didn't answer. Nora's voice broke. "I thought you'd never wake up. I didn't know how to face the guilt. I told myself you wouldn't want us to lose everything, but I was lying. To myself, to everyone." Tears filled her eyes, real ones this time, not for inheritance, but for loss. I reached out and took her hand. "You don't fix guilt by begging forgiveness," I said softly. "You fix it by living differently." She nodded, silent. Michael swallowed hard. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Mom. I needed to say I'm sorry." I studied their faces. Older now, humbled, fragile. Somewhere under all that greed, I found the children I once loved. "I already forgave you," I said, "the day I woke up in that hospital bed." They stayed for an hour. We didn't talk about money or property or the will. We talked about small things, memories, recipes, my husband's bad jokes. For a moment, it almost felt like family again. When they finally left, I stood by the window, watching their car disappear down the long, winding road. My heart didn't ache. It felt light, not because I'd gotten even, but because I'd let go. Now, my mornings begin with ocean light through lace curtains and the smell of bread warming in the oven. I still bake for the neighbors. Banana loaves, sourdough, the occasional pie for the mailman's birthday. I live simply, quietly. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the teapot or the glass window, the same silver hair, the same eyes that once stared at betrayal and saw something worth saving. They planned my funeral, but what they buried was their own conscience. And me? I rose from it. Not as a ghost of what I was, but as proof that it's never too late to start over. Because legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you build before you go.